Welcome back to Cloudy with a Chance of Insights, and joining me as usual this week are David and Cyrus. This week, David is looking at three connected developments. First, Microsoft's idea of a hill climbing machine, and that is a phrase I'm hearing more and more often from them, and what that tells us about how AI systems are starting to improve inside real products such as GitHub Copilot and Excel. He then moves into Azure Front Door Edge Actions, which brings programmable logic directly into the request path at Microsoft's Global Edge. And finally, he considers the reverse information paradox and whether organizations are giving away more knowledge than they realize as they adopt increasingly capable AI systems. Now, Cyrus, I knew somebody was going to do it this week, and it wasn't going to be me, but Cyrus is going to pick up on the Hugging Face piece that happened earlier on in the week with OpenAI, as well as some more security news around Defender and I believe Entra. And for me, this episode has sort of ended up circling around one theme, almost entirely by accident, I do hasten to add. I didn't plan it that way, it's just the way that it seems to have fallen out of the bag, that's why. So Microsoft has shipped something called the Agent Framework Harness, and I think unusually for one of these releases, it's actually a decent piece of engineering, so I want to spend a little bit of time on that. Then there's about 3 different sovereignty news items. So Ireland cancelling the Microsoft tender, a general progress out of Germany, and a French parliamentary report that landed a few days ago, cited my own Fable piece, almost word for word back to me, which I found a bit weird. But anyway, and then I want to close on a different security disclosure that dropped yesterday, something called AgentForger, which takes the same question we just sort of covered, but possibly a little bit a level deeper. But without any further ado, because I know we've got quite a lot to get through today, I'm going to hand it across to David to kick us off.
Super. Thanks, Richard. Yes, and the phrase of this week is hill climbing, and it's new to me, right? I've not really heard this, and maybe I'm just reading the wrong things, but anyway. So I wanted to start with what that actually means, because as you were saying, I think it is going to be one of those terms that gets picked up and I think used potentially loosely very quickly. So if you understand the I guess the origin, you'll be able to spot where it's being used well and where it's dare I say being borrowed purely for effect. And for folk, the TLDR here, the underlying concept is not a actual hill climbing machine, just in case anyone's confused. So Microsoft has started to use this term to describe its approach to developing and adapting new MAI, and I will expand the acronym in case people don't know what that is. So it's Microsoft AI models. And I guess it sounds slightly abstract. So like I said, it'd be useful for us to begin by running through what we think it is. And mainly because I think it represents a shift in how AI systems are going to be built and operated, potentially. Lip coffee. So hill climbing is an optimization technique. So I guess imagine standing somewhere on a landscape in a thick fog and you can't see the entire mountain that you're heading at. So you can't really plot the perfect route to the summit. What you can do is, I guess, examine the ground that's immediately around you, take a step in the direction that appears to go upwards, measure the result, and repeat. And in machine learning terms, the landscape represents sort of the various possible configurations of the model and the system. The height represents the performance against whatever evaluation you've defined. And then the machine makes change, tests it, retains the improvements, and then sort of carries on climbing. And I guess that makes it sound very ordinary in terms of model training. But Microsoft is applying this idea more broadly. So its hill climbing machine combines the model, the data, the product harness, and the reinforcement learning environment, plus the evaluations used to obviously determine whether the system is improving or not. And I think out of all of that, the word harness matters here. And I think you mentioned the word harness earlier, didn't you? Did you, Richard?
Yes.
I imagine that you did. Okay, so we may overlap a bit. Who knows? And the model, in this sense, doesn't operate independently. It sits within a product that provides tools, context, instructions, permissions, and feedback. So, for example, in GitHub Copilot, that environment understands code, understands files, things like developer actions, and whether suggestions are accepted. If you take another product like, I don't know, Excel, it understands workbooks, formulas, labels, and what the actions are available in the product. And this, in turn, creates a much richer learning environment than, dare we say, a generic bookmark, right? Bookmark? Benchmark. So Microsoft's MAI Code 1 Flash model was post-trained within the GitHub Copilot harness. And interestingly, I think Microsoft say that it's reached approximately 10% higher code acceptance rate than GPT-4 5.4 Mini and Haiku 4.5 in VS Code. Now, the interesting thing there is those are quite small models, right? In the grand scheme of things, the mini models are not massive. They're not the huge foundation models, so they're cheaper. And we care about the cheaper stuff, right? Especially, Richard and I and Cyrus, we're all experimenting and we keep running out of tokens and it's super frustrating. So you can imagine you're getting better improvement for fewer median tokens. That's hopefully a good thing. Were you going to say something? Go on.
No, I was literally just thinking about a report that I got sent the other day around GitHub Copilot usage, because we know we covered this in the pod, but I think everybody knows now. They went from basically being an all-you-can-eat based on a subscription model to a token-based pricing. And I have the dubious privilege of being sent the token usage reports now, especially as there is a cost related to them. And you can just see the cost has just gone like that. It's quite scary. And the amount that some individuals are using, it boggles my mind. But anyway, that is a governance topic for a different conversation.
Good. So where was I? So yeah, Microsoft also report that you kind of get stronger multi-day return rates among users. So sort of those are more product measures than I guess you could argue abstract laboratory scores. Obviously important because what they're measuring is whether it's actually genuinely useful as opposed to just being able to beat a benchmark. And then, so they use that coding model as a starting checkpoint for Excel. So they place the model inside an Excel, it's called reinforcement learning environment, where it could take actions. And then obviously have those actions sort of executed, reviewed, review the outcome, and then subsequently update the model. And I think the interesting point here is that starting model was designed for coding, right? Not spreadsheets. Interesting. And some of the agentic behavior was transferred. And the model was then, of course, taught how to use the specific tools and workflows of Excel, right? You've got tabs, you've got the whole gamut of stuff. I mean, Excel as a product is huge, right? And we only use a minimal percentage. I think the majority of us, when you crack open Excel. And they're saying the resulting model from that process is comparable with GPT 5.6 for common Excel tasks. But again, massively smaller, ergo cheaper, and capable of running on the H100, A100 type GPUs. So, a significant improvement in the grunt that's needed behind them. So yeah, that's kind of all the technical goodness behind hill climbing. Interesting, and hopefully that gives you a context. So, and we keep saying this, right? And I'm very much of the small language model mindset. But instead of assuming every problem requires a large general purpose model, start with something. Start with a capable model, put it inside the real operating environment, find what good looks like, and then allow it to practice. Is that a practice? Practice. And use the resulting evidence to improve it. Now, this, I might stop there because I've got a bunch of stuff to talk through, but that's a really nice segue to what Cyrus was going to talk about in terms of OpenAI doing exactly that and the resultant outcome. So I don't know. Shall we do a quick hop over? You all right to do that?
Yeah,
Cyrus?
absolutely. Let's just put Cyrus out of order, and
There's no order.
and that's my transcript gone out of the window. So there we go.
That's better.
Go on, Cyrus. Let's cover off the bigger sort of more widely, I suppose, publicized news story of the week: OpenAI and Hugging Face.
Yeah,
which always makes me laugh when I have to say that name.
It's funny. It's a funny name. No, just about this one. But before a comment about what you said, Richard. So you talked about the. I don't want to digress. So I write it down just to not digress. So you talked about the change of the cost model of this AI, and it's going from subscription to token based. And you use an example that just made me smile of a colleague or someone where you saw the costs going very up and you wonder what they were doing. And it's funny because now I'm being trained intensely on AI security, and I'm learning all new concept of detecting, defending against all sort of attack. That's why the news I'm going to talk about. And I especially using that in the context of Microsoft, what can we do? Defender for Cloud, Purview, XDR, and especially AI Foundry, where you use all the techniques to before the prompt and after whatever is generated on the cloud is a black box. And I wonder if a lot of people will use suddenly a lot of costs. Sometimes it's from things that are, you will be surprised, very dumb, or they forgot to turn it off, or the AI talk to each other and it's these loops. So I wonder if that can be also considered an AI abuse. So I don't want to digress, but if you have any thought on that, interrupt you at any time, because that's, I think a lot, when you do labs and training, you see, there's this abuse here, or false positive here. And when you see sometimes the detection, I understand why it's detected as an abuse, because stupid prompt can trigger a lot of work. And with that new cost model, it can be like it can be really bad.
So, I mean, I could probably talk for the rest of the podcast on that at the moment, because it is almost completely front and center in my day-to-day work at the moment is what do we do with token costs and token usage? And we're going from one extreme, and I'll try and keep this as brief as we can do, with internal usage. So again, we're, at least for this week, we're all three IBM employees. So I have to be careful about what I say. But internally, we're using something called IBM Bob, as Cyrus and both David know, and we have mentioned in the past. We're actually getting encouraged to use tokens. There is, I don't know whether any of you two have seen this. Yeah. There's a Slack channel where they've actually got a league table of the people that are using tokens. And the more tokens you use, the better. And yet I've got the flip side where we're doing GitHub Copilot, where we're looking at the token cost and go, oh my God, we need to reduce that. So, I'm in this weird thing where we've got one thing saying, let's use lots of tokens, and another bit that's saying, no, let's not use tokens. And then when we're developing solutions for clients, we have to be token aware. We have to be conscious of what we're developing that isn't just going to go and burn through a load of their tokens all in one go. But yeah, I say this is probably a topic for like a good 30-minute discussion. So I won't have it just at this point in time. I'll hand it back to you, Cyrus, for the OpenAI piece.
Yeah, I will try to not comment what you say. So because otherwise, as you said, it will be a half an hour.
Yeah.
Okay, so on July, so I tried to understand what happened because I that news about Hugging Face I've seen on my phones on news, but I ignored it because I said I don't have time. And a lot of people from my family, friends, they say, "Oh, have you saw that? And do you know how to? Can we defend against that?" My answer was, "I don't know." So I had to spend a lot of time to check what happened, and I made that in like few paragraphs. So what happened in a nutshell for whoever listened to us and don't understand, on July 16th, so like less than 2 weeks ago, Hugging Face disclosed an intrusion into part of its production infrastructure. So literally inside the infrastructure. And a malicious dataset triggered code execution inside the data processing pipeline. And how that happened, an autonomous agent then escalated access, collected cloud and cluster credentials, and you can imagine, and moved across internal environment through thousands of automated actions. Hugging Face used an AI-assisted detection and analyzed more than 17,000 events. Hosted models blocked some of the forensic content, which is scary, and so the team used a self-hosted open model for the investigation. For the CISOs who listen to us, agentic attack speed requires agentic defense. That's the conclusion. And the strongest controls here are isolated data processing, short-lived credential, strict workload identities, network segmentation, stronger cluster admission controls, and an AI-assisted incident response capability tested before a real event. I also checked if there's like a regulation against what happened, and I checked of course the famous one, the EU AI Act. It supports this through risk assessment, cybersecurity, logging and incident reporting duties for covered providers. But the way it happened is funny because all of that happened just by someone. I don't think it was malicious or not. Doing a request from OpenAI, and that request was, okay, let me try to find a solution to your request, which was somehow malicious, and the OpenAI, without even like forcing his way, find some how can I say, weak chain into the security and exploit it. And that's the ease of the way it was done that is scary, because we can't call it really like a really malicious intrusion. The way it was done, it was very so smooth and easy, and you can imagine how much in the time we used to call, for example, someone would try to hack his girlfriend or their friend or their family or whatever. They used to download some script kiddies. You remember, like, you don't know what you're doing, you don't know coding, but you just want to have access to information. So what you will do, you will use some random stuff you find online, and we know that's the best way to get your PC completely owned. But sometimes it worked, and that's why we called script kiddies. Now the script kiddies have access to extremely powerful tools, and it's just one thing happening randomly in July when people are sometimes on vacation, and we can imagine what will happen in Christmas. Again, it's always this, for me, this time of the year when you have vacation and you have less humans in the loop, and then you have like a surprising thing like that. So it's less worse than what we imagine. It's still very bad, but we know, because the question was, how do you protect yourself from that? We have already some regulation. Europe is good for doing regulation, and we have all the theory, but it's just like such a technical depth, and so much less people who are appointed to work on those things. So, when we talk about AI identity, and I will finish with that, we talk about AI identities. For me, it made me smile before. I said, okay, this is what we should do. But do we have in any of our clients, or even within us, IBM, people dedicated for that task, just to work on AI identity, the way they behave, the way it can be exploited, the way, instead of just doing a checklist, So it's still an open question. But, some people who don't know AI, don't know IT, randomly saying to me, like, how do we protect ourselves? Such a pure and innocent question. By opening the rabbit hole, it's like, okay, we know the answer, but we still really like thinking before AI. The people like CISOs or leaders, they became leaders before the AI was a threat. So it's very interesting to see how someone random, like, yeah, I want to access Hugging Face. Can you do it? Yeah, okay.
And it's super interesting because the direct link to what I was saying is, and go read it, right? The OpenAI sort of debrief of what happened, and then the joint working with Hugging Face was super interesting, and they set the model a challenge to answer some stuff right, and it realized it couldn't answer the things that it wanted. And be mindful, they took the guardrails off for this, right? So they were working in a sandbox environment, all the guardrails were off, everything, to your point, should have been okay. And the model then decided, I need to cheat to get the answer.
Yeah.
So it finds a vulnerability in a zero-day vulnerability in a proxy service somewhere. It gets into that, laterally moves, then realizes Hugging Face will probably have the answer because there's a bunch of stuff there. And then, to your point, Cyrus, then starts getting into the Hugging Face environment. So this is like using the same process that I just spoke about, right? It is trying to improve itself and trying to get to the right answer. So yeah, it's super interesting, and just goes to show what happens when you don't have the right guardrails in place.
Yeah.
Go on.
And we talked last week, David, not last week, sorry, a fortnight ago, around post-quantum cryptography and the issues related to that. In effect, we might need to coin a term for post-AI security or cyber or something, because it is changing. Not only the way that we have to defend, but also the attackers are changing the way that they attack, or at least the availability of the tools and the knowledge level you need to actually do anything. That. Plus, obviously, the inadvertent stuff. Although, was it inadvertent? I am very cynical, as everybody knows, and I can't remember who it was. I think it might have been Satya was saying that the Fable stuff and Mythos stuff was very well scripted or marketed. I think he made something comment along those lines. Don't sue me if I got it slightly wrong, please. And then suddenly, like a day later, we've got OpenAI going, "Hey, look, our model's so good it broke through this thing and attacked Hugging Face." And I'm a little bit going,
yeah.
Same.
I get that.
But,
Good.
But anyway, I think we need to go back to you, David, to finish your last two topics, I think.
Yeah, and let me just wrap up. So, the quality of the evaluation becomes super critical in this context, right? A hill climbing system will optimize towards the hill that you give it. If the evaluation measures only whether an answer looks plausible, it's going to produce confident but unreliable output, right? If you measure task completion or factual accuracy or policy compliance and all these things, right, the optimization target becomes a lot more useful down the road. And Microsoft, I think, now call it frontier tuning. Is it frontier tuning approach, which extends this concept into the enterprise workflows where the models can learn from sort of real work? And again, we've spoken at length about all the what are they called? Work IQ and Fabric IQ and all that stuff, right? That's a direct correlation there. So that all leads us, I think, to a fairly interesting architectural question. We love architectural questions, don't we? But are you buying a model, or are you buying a system that can improve? And those are very, very discrete things. The model actually can be replaced or taken away, as we've spoken about, right? Which causes its own challenges. So I think that, something to think on there. My second thing quickly was some good technical, interesting information, which is Azure Front Door edge actions. Yes. So we know Azure Front Door gives organizations a global entry point, right? For web applications, it's routing, acceleration, caching, all that stuff. I'm sure people know by now. And until now, most custom processing had been handled either through sort of the declarative rules engine that you've got in Azure Front Door, or then forwarding the request on to, whether it's a gateway, an API function, or whatever, right? And edge actions introduce another option. Super cool. They allow a lightweight bit of JavaScript to execute directly within the Azure Front Door's global points of presence while the request is being processed. Now, that's really interesting. Oh, by the way, it's in public preview. So what it does, it will operate on incoming client requests, things that are supported right now because it is in preview. I think it's stuff like A/B testing, header manipulation, request rejection, which is really interesting, and dynamic origin selection. There's a bunch of other stuff as well. What was the other interesting? Oh, the URL rewriting as well. And the action itself receives a constrained immutable context. So it contains stuff like server variables, healthy origins, geo information, stuff like that, and a timestamp. And it gives us as architects a programmable decision point before the traffic even reaches the origin, which I think is really interesting. So if you think about it, an edge action can make a decision based on several pieces of operational context, right? It might direct particular tenants to a dedicated origin. It might keep regulated traffic within an approved path. It could route to the A/B thing, could route particular users into a given experiment, or dare I say, avoid an origin based on health information. So those are really useful things to have right at the very edge before they even get into your environment. The other super useful thing that I mentioned is the token validation. So being able to reject an invalid request at the edge means it never consumes application API gateway or network capacity further downstream. And then the same principle applies to things like malform requests and policy checks that can be performed safely within the available context, which I think opens up a whole bunch of really, really useful capability from the security perspective, right? If we can stop it at the edge before it even gets anywhere near you, it's super interesting. I think there's an app modernization, angle as well, because, we see many organizations that have got legacy apps that can't easily change their URL structure, the headers or the routing behavior. And potentially edge logic could provide a controlled adaptation layer without requiring immediate changes to the application itself. So I think that'll be an interesting one to explore. From the security angle, we all love security stuff. So it's being run using the Hyperlight isolation technology. So that, I don't know what that is. So Hyperlight is a sort of a lightweight micro VM style isolation without needing sort of your conventional OS. And then everything, as I said, runs within that context. So super constrained, doesn't give access to the host environment, all that good stuff. And then I'm going to skip through that because we've got... what was I going to talk about next? Oh, the reverse information paradox, and I think this came from one of Satya's notes. I don't know if you've come across that. He's got a little website where it's like his blog, and I pulled it from there. And the reverse information paradox is associated with an economist, Kenneth something. I remember it's Arrow, yeah, and describes the difficulty of selling information. So, for example, a buyer can't properly understand the value of information without seeing it, but once the seller reveals it, the buyer's already possesses it, right? So, and the reverse information paradox argues that AI creates the opposite problem. The buyer purchases access to intelligence, but then must reveal its own information to make that intelligence useful. Quite an interesting thought process there and thought experiment to go through. So, organizations will supply prompts, documents, workflow traces, tools, calls, all that stuff, and examples of what good looks like. And the more, I guess, effectively, and this goes back to, do you buy it, do you build it, all that stuff, the system is integrated, the more the organization exposes how it operates and how it, as an organization judges quality, because that'll differ across, many different organizations. So it's not really a conventional data leakage problem per se. A given provider may promise not to train general models on customer documents, but there is important knowledge that exists in the exhaust, and what effectively comes out as a result of all the use through that generated use. Things like corrections tell the system what a given organization thinks is wrong. And when you think about like the big four or the various consulting organization, there's a bunch of implicit IP that's wrapped up in these conversations that you're having with the AI. So I think, the super interesting, and it's where I think the reverse information paradox meets that hill climbing machine, right? Because the organization's greatest value might not be the data placed into it or the prompt. It's the learning generated as the AI repeatedly attempts real work and is corrected. Right? So I think to the point we were just making earlier, the governance boundary must therefore extend beyond before protecting store data, to almost understanding who owns and can reuse prompts, right? Right now, there's a push, I think, to share as many prompts as you can, as broadly as you can, right, within an organization. Many people are advocating that, prompt libraries and all that stuff. But I think equally that then the what used to be sort of wrapped up in groups of people in an organization is lifted up and up and up, and you can argue that's a good thing, but equally you can argue then it makes it far easier for that to be intercepted maliciously or otherwise, right? So I thought super interesting conversation, one to mull on a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to have to dig into that one. So I think there's some concepts there that I think would apply very much to one of the projects that I'm working on at the moment. And I'm going to have to admit, and everybody that's listened to this podcast knows I've been doing this not podcasting for an awful long time, but working in IT for an awful long time.
Yes.
And when you started talking about URL rewriting, my brain went to UAG server. I don't know if you remember that.
Richard.
Yeah, I know. It's terrible, but I actually literally use that for that very purpose, to rewrite URLs so that an old legacy application could work, and also to switch zones between internal and external zones as well. So that just went, UAG server, which, if my memory serves me correctly, stands for Unified Access Gateway.
Something similar. Before somebody else robbed the comment in the chat if you remember UAG.
Again, so there you go. Sorry, my age and just how long I've been doing some of this stuff. It's catching up.
Very good. I've spoken
anyway, Cyrus, over to you, I think, for some updates on Defender and I think Entra, I think you said, or at least I said in the intro, so it better be Entra.
No, it's Intune on the Defender, but you're right. I always did Entra, and this week there was nothing more interesting, so I didn't want to share. I handpicked the news. I don't want just to be like an RSS feed. So the two news for Intune that catch my attention, and the one is really subtle, again, it's about mobile. I don't know why I'm interested by mobile now. It's maybe an entry point or something I don't master enough. So there's a new Android enterprise setting called block apps from exposing app functions, which is a mouthful, and I didn't understood what's app functions. App functions are actions that are another app assistant or on-device AI agent can call inside the managed application. So that's why it catch my attention, because you have a Samsung Pixel. You have sometimes I talk to my wife, and then suddenly my phone saying speak louder, and then the AI agent took over and try to talk. So there is again in my brain is always about risk, and these settings let organization basically just stop manage apps from exposing those actions. And the impact is significant when you check how it works. As mobile AI assistant become more capable, you can control everything, and we talked about that just before with OpenAI, but on the phone it can be worse because you have all the concept of agents, and we are somehow, I include myself, somehow believe that the phone is more secure for some reason, unless you go to an airport and you connect to the public Wi-Fi, but it's more than that. So Intune can control which corporate app are available as tools to those assistants. So you can let the user continue with the AI agent, but control if it try to pass sensitive information or try to extract things from your Outlook or from your Teams or SharePoint, which is the same. So that turns mobile application management into part of AI agent governance, and I like the word. The second one is ChatGPT is now an Intune protected app. So it sounds basic, but actually, if you have to think of bring your own device. People who use ChatGPT and you need to respond to an email, etc. People have the reflex to say, you know what, ChatGPT, help me. I just arrived to a new job, and that now with Intune, you can say, okay, no, it's your personal device, and we will apply. And I know, Richard, you know that, but you know what I'm saying is you can apply Intune app protection policies to corporate data used inside the ChatGPT mobile app. It's your personal ChatGPT app. It's your personal device. Yet you can apply Intune app protection policies to say, oh, hold on, this copy paste you're doing is coming from Outlook, or there's a protection label on SharePoint, or you're using sensitive data or whatever from the CRM or the ERP application from like Dynamics, whatever. So you can't use those data to ChatGPT. And not only that, you can still probably use it depending on the policy, but you will at least alert the IT gods in your company to watch you and talk to you. So I think that's something I was waiting for, because it was a gray line. And when I asked the question to Microsoft, it was always like, yeah, you can use Defender for cloud apps, and you can monitor, and you have to create custom detection rules, etc. But that's basic. ChatGPT is the main used one, and I'm sure there will be the same for Claude. Will I talk about the third one? Yeah, I censor myself. It's not interesting. For Defender, the strongest Defender update is an AI agent posture risk. Is now in preview. Defender can assess the risk level of enterprise agents and local agents found on the endpoints. So again, that's very cool. The score uses configuration. So talk about the risk score. You use configuration, access, runtime activity, endpoint context, user context, and active alerts. And this helps a security team answer a much better question than simply asking how many agents exist. I'm saying that because before, when you are trained on this kind of Defender for AI, Microsoft, I'm going to be a bit critical here, Microsoft to say, hey, we cover it. Look, we created a new dashboard. And I know you guys, what you think about dashboards. With the dashboard, you can see how many agents you have. but often it's for me, it's honestly useless. So now you can answer better question. So which agent has the permission? Sorry, yeah.
Another dashboard I have to go to look at my agent telemetry. Please, Microsoft, just one dashboard, one. That's all I'm asking.
But it's because when you're in meeting with them and they proudly show you that, and you're like on the chat, you first, and then you can take the mic and say, "Can I click on the numbers?" No, but you can, with PowerShell, you can do that. And please don't force me. So it's not a dashboard anymore. It's like just numbers to say you did your job. But yeah, I know. So now the question you can answer is, again, to not be a dashboard, is which agent has the permission, behavior, like an environment that could create the greatest impact. The next update, I think I've talked about that on my LinkedIn or a blog post before. It was a preview, but I want to talk about this here. Maybe I did before, but I'm not sure. It's I know where I saw it multiple times. Meryl Fernando talked about it. And that's why you're right when I did say I talk about Entra, but it's not Entra. It's the Active Directory domain investigation page. It's now generally available. And I encourage you to play with that. It's honestly a game changer. In a nutshell, it brings domain properties, deployment health, service accounts, sensitive identities, recommendations, group policies, and trusted relationship into one investigation view. So that's a very good one, especially for incident response. It gives analysts a faster understanding of the hidden gaps, identity environment around an attack. So I'm surprised it didn't exist before, but yeah. I talked about that last time, but Defender has also expanded AI agent runtime protection. I was thinking of David last time. I gave the context. The July update adds agent native inspection for Codex CLI. So that's again going to the point of 2 weeks ago, 1 month ago actually, and the GitHub Copilot application. It also adds a network inspection that you will see a lot of communication from Microsoft about that, because that was the missing gap. For agents that use auto interface, including open close style agents. And I'm talking about style, not only open close. And yeah, that's it for me for the news. There's more to talk about Hugging Face, but I don't want to digress. We talked now enough about that.
Excellent. Thank you, Cyrus. Right. So I have 3 things to go through today, and I'm going to try and go through them as quickly but as succinctly as I possibly can do. Now, the first one is, so the Microsoft Agent Framework team put out a post this week, imaginally entitled, the Microsoft Agent Framework Harness is now released. Now, I went in expecting another sort of wrapper release. And actually, I think this one has got a little bit more depth involved in it. And here's what I think it's solving. So, as we know, every agent needs a loop that keeps calling tools until the job is done. So history persisted somewhere so a crash doesn't lose the run. Some way of stopping the context window falling over on a long task, which they're imaginally calling compaction. A to-do list so it plans before it executes. Memory that survives across turns, and an approval model, because eventually, obviously, the agent wants to do something and somebody has to decide if it's allowed. So up until now, you had to build all of that yourself, basically. But the harness is bundling it into one function call, in effect. So you hand it the instructions, tools, function invocation, history, compaction, and more. With a tool approval, with a don't ask again option, and telemetry are all then switched on by default, each one of those individually configurable. So my first thought was this is just semantic kernel with a few new sort of bells and whistles and a new name. That's me being a little bit skeptical as usual. But the bit that landed most for me is the approval model and don't ask again as a standing rule, plus the heuristic auto approval for safe calls. There's also a coming soon list, which has got some stuff in there that I think is actually probably a little bit more interesting than what was actually shipped. So background agents delegating to each other, file access tools, looping, shell tooling, all still in alpha. Now, every one of those is probably a governance conversation waiting to happen, and Microsoft know it. So you do get a massive warning when you opt into those. Now, I haven't built anything on these as yet, so this is me just sort of having a look at the documentation and sort of having an educated guess about what is going to come out of the back of it. But I will be playing around with it later on this week, and if anything pops up, I will share with you on the next episode. So next one, and this is a bit of a departure, well, sort of, because it's not really an architecture story. It's more of a sort of a business procurement story, but it's out of Ireland. But stick with me because I think it's actually a similar conversation to what we've been having, but from a different angle. And this is also going to test some of my pronunciation skills. So if anybody speaks Gaelic or even German a little bit later on, please forgive me in advance. Anyway, so the Irish government has cancelled a tender for Microsoft software and services. Not small money. The existing framework runs to about 350 million euros and expires sometime in September 27. And the replacement that just got pulled is reportedly being scoped at between 750 million and €1 billion. So in the Dáil, the Irish Parliament, the minister responsible, Frankie Fahan, said the competition was cancelled after matters of concern were raised by an interested party. And a new tender would come as early as possible. Basically, from what he said, he got pushed very hard on why alternatives to Microsoft hadn't been considered, particularly given Ireland's position of currently holding the Council of Euro presidency. So obviously, I don't know really what the matters of concern were. This hasn't been made public. But related to this, there's two other pieces coming from the wider Europe. So the first one is Schleswig Holstein, up in the north of Germany, which has been migrating, I think we discussed this before actually, off Microsoft since 2024. And they gave a progress report last week. So currently they stand at something like 44,000 mailboxes and 100 million emails and calendar entries have now moved off of Outlook onto an open source alternative called Open Exchange. And about 80% of that state's 30,000 desktops are now on LibreOffice. So full independence from Windows is the target by the end of the year. And it seems like they might be on track for that, even though it's been a bit of a rough ride. Opposition to politicians have criticised the quality of the rollout. But at the moment, it's the closest thing I think Europe has got to a working case study of migrating away from Microsoft onto a more sovereign-based solution. And we've talked about sovereignty so many times on this. And again, particularly for Cyrus, this one, I think. And finally, there was how do I put this? On the 15th of July, the French National Assembly basically published a report on digital dependencies. The Senate's report last year was almost entirely about data, who can read it, etc. But that's the old question. This one puts a second question on the table for the first time, specifically in a French parliamentary text, which is, can a foreign government simply switch a service off? And to make the point, the report cites two cases that have nothing to do with data access. So the first one, and this actually came up in the news this week as well, so I don't know if anybody else saw it, but apparently one of the ICC or International Criminal Court judges has lost access to their emails after sanctions and the export control suspension of Anthropic's Fable and Mythos models earlier this year, which obviously I've talked about, I've blogged about, we covered it on the previous things. So two interesting examples of where European citizens have been stopped from using services hosted in the US. So a French parliamentary committee independently landed on precisely that distinction. So we basically have an off switch for some of these things that we just have no control over. It's quite flattering that the French government, or is it, that came to the same decision that I did. Anybody that wants a little bit more depth on that one, please feel free to go and read the links. So it will be in the show notes, and obviously there's my post on there. Now I could hear some nods or questions potentially from David or Cyrus. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to catch up on there, or otherwise I'll pop on to the last topic.
No, you're French, man. Like you think like a French, so. No, I didn't know where you were going with that, and I remember this ICC agent where, and it's it's something that lasted. It's not something like an event and they forget. They are discussing actively that. It's Parliament, then it's Senate. It will make an impact. I thought the UK did the same about the control. They integrated that into the.
So there's a couple of interesting things, and again, I have got a blog post on this. I'm not going to go too in depth, but Andrew Bailey, one of the Bank of England governors, if not the governor, I'd have to check, did a speech in Mansion House last week where he was talking a lot about this, and also the FCA has now put some rules in place that allow them to regulate the cloud providers, so Google, Microsoft, AWS, etc., etc. So not quite sure what that means, but those processes are being put in place.
I remember from watching the news for France, there was also a heated debate with MIFOS, and they were like a consortium of industrial and talking to the government to say we need European initiatives because we can't depend only on extraterritorial leaders, which is funny because we are a bit late, but it's good to discuss that at least.
Yeah, I seriously think sovereign cloud for Europe, perhaps less so for other regions, but certainly for Europe is going to be a big debate, and you can see it even with some of the sort of sort of regional authorities moving off of Microsoft, raising concerns about not capability access in some instances, just pure being able to access some of the features correctly. Let alone where data is sitting. But again, this is something that I've gone through several times. I don't want to rehash it just yet. But it's going to be interesting, and I do use that term a lot. But I think in this case, it's going to there's going to be a lot of movement and discussion around it.
Absolutely.
So, which brings me on to my last topic, which is a security topic, and it is involving OpenAI, but it is not involving Hugging Face. Basically yesterday, which as we're recording this on the Friday was Thursday, the 3rd or something like that. Zenity Labs published a piece about something they've called AgentForger. So in OpenAI's workspace agents, the ChatGPT feature that builds an agent connecting to Outlook, Gmail, Slack, Drive, SharePoint, blah, 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 running on a schedule. Normally, there's an interactive process. So templates, instructions, connect tools, decide on approvals, preview, publish, blah, 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 blah. What Zenity found is that the builder page accepts URL parameters that drive that entire flow automatically, including one that gets submitted and executed the moment the page loads. So an attacker puts a full set of instructions into a link, sends it as a phishing email, and the moment a logged in victim clicks it, the builder runs those instructions with no further interaction required. So the payload they demonstrated connects every already authorized connector, so no new consent screen needed, sets approvals to never ask, so the safety gate that stops the agent silently sending emails gets switched off by the very instructions creating the agent, then sets up the schedule, checking in every 5 minutes, and publishes the thing live. So Zenity's own name for it is good. So a cross-site agent forgery, not one forged request, but a whole autonomous agent living inside the organization's trust boundary with the victim's own access and no approval gate left standing, which is scary, I think, because that takes your standard sort of phishing email or business email compromise to a completely different level. Now, to be, I don't know whether it's to be fair, but Zenity did raise that directly with OpenAI. They didn't disclose it until after a fix had been implemented. But going back to Cyrus, your point right at the start of the pod, and I think David's as well, is that we have to be. I don't even know how you can realistically stop some of that stuff at the moment. Hygiene about not clicking on email links is a really good starting point, but we know how well that works or doesn't work in most instances. So another thing for people to be worried about if they've got access to basically, in theory, anything that's got some sort of autonomy to go and do things specifically with your email account. So Copilot, Cowork, Claude Cowork, Google Gemini, anything like that is potentially, I suppose, vulnerable to this type of attack.
Wow.
Yeah.
Makes
So on that cheerful note,
and it might sound dumb, right? But isn't that what safe links were designed to fix? Because it throws it into a destination chamber and sees what it does. Isn't that the entire purpose of what safe links are?
I don't know. I mean, I know what you mean, but there must be some sort of flaw or gap in the safe link stuff, because I know from experience, not with IBM before anybody says anything, but with some small SME businesses that I do, I am aware of, that they're still getting hit with those phishing emails, and people are still able to click on those links even though they have got safe links enabled. So there must be some flaw or workarounds that people can sort of use that.
Look at that. That's interesting. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. But no, you're right. I mean, there are tools that you could, even from the Microsoft. And I know we've also talked about sort of the where the SME sort of field fits into this as well, because they might not have the ability to go the full E5 plus, the extra Purview and extra Entra licenses. And that's going to get even worse now with the E7 stuff coming out. So, is a small business going to pay $99 pounds or dollars a month just to get the extra agentic security that they're going to get with Agent 365, for example? Who knows? But it's it comes back to that post AI security.
Might be worth picking up, Richard, because I think I heard that some of that might be falling down the tiers, because I think they realise people want security, but they don't necessarily want all the agent building stuff. So
yeah, I mean, certainly you can get Agent 365 as its own SKU.
Yeah.
So you can have, I think you still have to have E5 though, but don't quote me. I'm not a licensing expert by any stretch of the imagination.
No.
But yeah, that is becoming a challenge for people, I think, especially when budgets might be constrained, especially at the moment.
Sure. Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Cool. So, yes, that just about wraps it up for us, and a little bit over, running a tiny bit long, I think, this week, but yeah, just a bit. But so that all that leaves me to say is, and I always do this right at the end, and every guide I've read about this says you should do it right at the front. But hey, no, I am contrary. If you did enjoy this or found anything useful here, please like, subscribe, follow, whatever the mechanism is on the platform that you're consuming us. Drop us a comment. Tell me whether I got the UAG name right, or whether there's something else that we might have missed on, the Zenity piece, or whether I pronounced the German region and the Irish Parliament correctly, for example. But please do get in touch. Keep us up honest and up to date. But otherwise, all it's left for me to do is say thank you for joining us. I think David is going off on a well-earned break for a couple of weeks. So we will catch up with him on his return. But anyway, thank you very much for listening, and we'll catch you next time.